week everything went wrong started with a warning light on my dashboard. By Friday, I had a car repair bill in one hand and a medical bill in the other. My name is Raymond Ellis. I was 51, working full-time as a maintenance supervisor, and I thought I was doing all right. My bills were paid. I had a steady job. I wasn't living fancy, but I wasn't falling apart either. Then 2 emergencies hit in the same week, and I found out how little room I really had. I could handle one surprise, maybe. 2 of them at once took every dollar I had and still left me reaching for a credit card. That was the week I realized being current on my bills wasn't the same as being prepared. I needed enough space in my finances to breathe when something went wrong. The warning light had been coming on for a few days. At first it would flash and disappear. Then it stayed on. I told myself I'd take the car in after payday. I'd said that before. The car still ran, and I had other things to pay. Rent, electric, phone, groceries, the usual stuff. I figured the light could wait a few more days. Then the car started shaking on the way home from work. Not a little vibration. The whole steering wheel was moving. I pulled into a gas station and sat there listening to the engine. I work in maintenance. I spend all day fixing things. But cars aren't my area. I knew enough to know something was wrong. I just didn't know how expensive it was going to be. The mechanic called the next morning. He said I needed a new alternator, a belt, and some other work before he'd feel comfortable sending me back out on the road. The total was just over $1,400. I asked him to repeat it. $1,400. I had about $900 in savings. That was everything. I'd been calling it my emergency fund, but it wasn't really an emergency fund. It was money I hadn't spent yet. There's a difference. I told the mechanic to fix the car. I needed it for work. I used the $900 I had saved and put the rest on a credit card. I didn't like it, but I figured I'd pay it down over the next couple of months. That was the plan. Then 2 days later, I got dizzy at work. I was carrying supplies down a hallway when the floor felt like it moved under me. I sat down against the wall. One of the guys on my team asked if I was all right. I told him I just needed a minute. I tried to stand up, but I still felt off. My supervisor wanted me to go get checked out. I didn't want to. I knew what a medical visit could cost, but I also knew I didn't feel right. So I went. They ran tests. Nothing life-threatening. That was the good news. The bad news was that I had a deductible I hadn't met and more out-of-pocket costs than I expected. The bills didn't all come at once. They showed up over the next few weeks. A lab bill, a clinic bill, a separate charge for something I thought was already included. Every time I opened the mailbox, there was another envelope. The total came to a little over $2,100. That was on top of the car repair. In less than 1 month, I had more than $3,500 in expenses I hadn't planned for. That number bothered me. Not because I thought I should have $3,500 sitting around all the time. It bothered me because I didn't have any real plan for a surprise. I had a steady paycheck. I had decent benefits. I paid my bills. I thought that meant I was in pretty good shape. Then life asked for money I didn't have, and I found out how close I was to the edge. I put part of the medical bills on another credit card. I set up a payment plan for the rest. Then the first card payment came due. Then the medical payment. Then the regular bills. My paycheck started disappearing before I could even look at it. I was paying for the emergency after the emergency was already over. That's the part I hadn't thought about. The car was fixed. The medical visit was done. But the cost stayed with me, month after month. I started cutting back. I stopped eating out. I canceled a streaming service. I put off buying new work boots even though the soles were wearing down. I told myself I was getting things under control, but most of what I was doing was trying to survive the payments. I wasn't building anything. I wasn't preparing for the next problem. I was cleaning up the last one. Then the water heater at home started making a strange noise. I stood there listening to it, and I could feel my chest tighten. The water heater still worked. Nothing had happened yet, but I was already afraid of the bill. That was the moment that got me. I didn't want every sound in my house or every light on my dashboard to make me panic. I wanted enough room in my finances to breathe. Not forever, just long enough to handle what came next without reaching for another card. So I sat down and looked at the numbers. I didn't start with some big goal. I didn't tell myself I needed 6 months of expenses before I could feel safe. That number would have discouraged me. I started with $500. That was it, 500. I picked that number because it was enough to cover a tire, a small repair, a deductible, or part of a bigger bill. It wouldn't solve everything, but it could stop a small problem from becoming new debt. The first thing I did was open a separate savings account. I didn't want the money sitting in my regular checking account where I could slowly spend it and tell myself I'd put it back later. I named the account Emergency Only. That sounds simple. It was simple. I needed simple. Then I figured out how much I could move into it every payday. At first, it was $25. That didn't feel like much. But $50 a month was more than I had been saving before. I also started sending part of any overtime money there. Not all of it. I knew I'd get tired of the plan if every extra dollar disappeared into savings. So I split it. Some went to the emergency account. Some went toward the credit card. A small amount stayed with me. I wanted the plan to last longer than one motivated weekend. I went through my bills and looked for things I could change without making myself miserable. I lowered my phone plan. I stopped paying for a storage unit that mostly held things I hadn't touched in years. I sold a few tools I had duplicates of. I brought lunch to work more often. Nothing dramatic. No big sacrifice. Just several smaller changes that gave me a little more room. The first $100 felt slow. The second 100 came faster. Then I got a small tax refund. Normally, I would have used it to catch up on something or buy something I'd been putting off. This time, I put half of it into the emergency account. That got me past $500. I remember looking at that balance and thinking, this isn't much. Then I corrected myself. It was more than I had before. That mattered. A few months later, my washing machine stopped draining. The repair was $320. I was irritated, but I wasn't scared. I paid for it from the emergency account. Then I started rebuilding the balance. That was the first time an unexpected bill had come and gone without landing on a credit card. That feeling was different. I didn't feel rich. I felt steady. There's a difference. After that, I raised the goal to $1,000. That took longer. There were months when I only added $20. There were months when I added $100. One month I added nothing because something else came up. I used to think missing 1 month meant the whole plan had failed. Now I looked at the account and reminded myself that the money was still there. I hadn't gone backward. I also changed the way I thought about emergencies. Before, everything felt urgent. A sale at the hardware store, a family request, a bill I wanted to pay early. I had to get honest about what counted as an emergency. An emergency was something unexpected, necessary, and time-sensitive. A broken furnace in winter, a medical expense, a repair that kept me from getting to work. It wasn't a weekend trip. It wasn't a new television. It wasn't covering somebody else's problem every time they called. That last part was hard. I'm the person people usually call when they need help. I like being dependable. But I started saying, I can help with part of it, instead of covering the whole thing. Sometimes I had to say no. That didn't feel good. But neither did borrowing money to help somebody else. The emergency fund started changing more than just my bank balance. It changed how I handled stress. When something went wrong, I stopped reacting like the whole month was ruined. I could look at the problem, check the account, and decide what to do. That pause was worth a lot. I kept paying down the credit cards too, slowly. The balance from the car repair took longer than I wanted. The medical bills took time. But because I had a small cushion, I stopped adding new debt every time something happened. That's when the balances finally started moving in the right direction. I had spent years thinking the answer was to pay everything off first, then start saving. That sounds reasonable. But every time I sent every extra dollar to debt, something came up and I used the card again. I needed savings and debt payoff working together, even if the savings started small. A year after that bad month, I had a little over $1,700 set aside. Then the car needed another repair. This time it was about $900. I paid it. The account dropped. I hated watching the number go down. Then I reminded myself that this was what the money was for. The fund had done its job. I didn't owe a credit card company. I didn't have a new monthly payment. I didn't spend the next 6 months paying interest on a repair that was already finished. I just rebuilt the account. That's when I understood something. An emergency fund isn't supposed to sit there forever looking impressive. It's supposed to be used when life happens. The goal is to rebuild it after. Today, I've got more saved than I did back then. It's still not 6 months of expenses. I'm not going to pretend I've got everything covered. I'm still working on it. But I'm not one flat tire away from using a credit card. I'm not opening every medical envelope with the same fear. I'm not telling myself that being current means I'm prepared. I know better now. The biggest lesson wasn't that I needed some huge amount of money. It was that I needed a first layer of protection. $500 helped. $1,000 helped more. Then I kept building. The emergency didn't wipe out my life. It exposed the weak spot. Once I saw it, I could work on it. I still have bills. I still have repairs. I still have months when something goes wrong. But now there's space between the problem and panic. That space lets me think. It lets me make a decision. It lets me breathe. If my situation feels familiar, I hope this story helps you see that an emergency fund doesn't have to start big to make a difference. Please like the video and subscribe to Broke to Breathing for more informative stories like this one.